Welcome to Veritas Group's webinar, Stop Treating Your Donor Like an ATM. I'm Karen Kendrick, Senior Director of Client Engagement here at Veritas, and I'll be working behind the scenes to help you as Jeff Schreifels and Matt Gill present today. Before I introduce them, I want to make sure you know how to use our webinar system. Because of the number of you on this webinar today, we won't be able to have you on video, but it's so important that we hear from you and know what questions are bubbling up throughout the presentation. And I'm sure if you're wondering, someone else is too. So to help me out to keep track, if you would pop that question into the Q&A box, feel free to chat away in the chat box, but questions, pop those into the Q&A box. That's a separate thing at the bottom of your screen. And as an FYI, we'll be sending you a link to a recording of this webinar later this week. That page will also include a PDF version of the slide deck for you to reference. So now let's begin the webinar. Jeff, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I'm principal and owner of Veritas. Hope you're well. Today I'm calling in from just outside of Philadelphia. It is very rainy. I don't know if you're on the East Coast. Everyone's getting rain and humidity. So if you're on the East Coast of the U.S., let me know if you're getting the same kind of weather. But we are excited to be here today. We've got a lot to share. So Matt, I'll send it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. And good to see everyone. My name is Matt, coming at you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Looks like we have some Minnesotans on the call today as well. Background in major gift fundraising leadership for a decade or so. Prior to coming to Veritas, I was a Veritas client when I was at the Greater Twin Cities United Way, and the training and the coaching that I received from Veritas really helped me get to the next level with my own fundraising knowledge and career. And now it's great to be on this side of the house. Prior to my nonprofit work, I was on active duty in the Navy, special operations and public affairs, still in the reserves as a public affairs officer. And it says former college croquet caddy on there, Jeff. We don't have time for that story. We got a lot of people on this call. Let's keep moving.
Okay. I got to hear. I don't think I've heard that story. All right. Now, before we get started on today's topic, I just want to share a bit about who we are at Veritas, because some of you on the call might be pretty familiar with us, but there are a lot of others that may not. We are passionately relationship focused and grounded in a data-driven approach. And this dynamic is critical to the system, structure, and strategy that we have found to be successful in mid, major, and planned giving programs. And we have a vision to help nonprofits of all sizes create a culture and approach to fundraising that will help you create transformational relationships with your donors. Now, we accomplish this vision through a focused strategy and approach. Over the years, we've worked with thousands of nonprofits through our consulting work and online academy, and we've analyzed millions of donor records. This has framed our strategy and helped us identify the key pillars to success, which include creating buy-in across your organization, a focus on donor and value attrition, improving revenue per donor, increasing net revenue to your programs, and being committed to meaningful relationships with your donors. And we've gotten to work with some pretty phenomenal organizations over the years. And this is just a brief picture of who we've partnered with to create more transformational donor relationships. The trends we've been hearing about for the last few years around declining client revenue, budget constraints, and other pressures in fundraising continue to be a challenge across the sector. But as you'll learn in today's webinar, you can start to address these trends and move out of a transactional fundraising mindset by treating your donors as real partners, not ATMs. Now, most organizations don't see themselves as being transactional. You may describe yourself as donor-centered, mission-driven, relationship-focused. But the truth is that you likely have transactional systems in place that are a barrier to a deeper relationship with your donors. Here are just a few of the common examples we see of transactional fundraising practices. You have systems that don't support the donor journey. This can be something like having a slow gift processing system that delays your ability to thank the donor for their gift, or sticky internal processes that make the transition of a donor from direct mail to mid-level to major gifts challenging and clunky. You primarily communicate with your donors about giving. This means your communication strategy is out of balance, or you may be relying exclusively on direct response rather than incorporating meaningful touch points that report back on impact. Tell a changed life story, share the need, and connect the donor to your mission. You aren't incorporating the donor's communication preferences and interests in your communication strategy. This might look like a mandate that every donor gets a particular marketing report, even if it doesn't relate to their interests. And lastly, you may be pursuing money at the cost of a long-term relationship. This could sound like pressure coming from management to get as many gifts in before the fiscal year as possible, without considering the donor or having the relationship as the focus. Staying in this transactional mindset can have devastating effects on your organization and your relationship with the donor. Here's what we're likely to see if you don't move into a more relationship-focused fundraising approach. You may get some large gifts, but the donor won't feel honored or seen as a partner, so you'll struggle to build a long-term relationship. We had a major gift officer who donor gave $12 million to this one organization, $12 million. And they didn't hear anything from that organization for 5 years. No one. And finally, a new MGO realized this and contacted the donor. And obviously the donor said, hey, I felt totally forgotten and unappreciated. And no one shared how the students did who received my scholarship funds. I mean, can you imagine not stewarding or communicating with a donor who'd given 12 million? But you know what? Even if they'd given 10,000 or 5,000, not reaching out and communicating and reporting back on the impact of their gift could be devastating. And the donors don't hear how they're making a difference. So what happens if they don't hear if they're making a difference? They stop giving. And this will all manifest in minimal or stagnant growth because you aren't properly nurturing donor relationships. So, what does it look like when you do move into a more relationship-focused strategy where you're treating your donors like real partners? Well, you honor the donor's inclination, communication preferences, and passions and interests throughout your strategy and communication with the donor. You regularly report back on the impact of a donor's giving and take the opportunity to celebrate the donor. You see the donor as part of a greater community that is coming together to achieve your mission. You see them as a real partner in your work. And internally, when you're relationship focused, you don't have unhealthy competition or silos. Everyone is working together to further the mission and doing it as part of the community.
That's right, Jeff. And super important stuff. And the question that maybe is coming to your mind is how do we do that? How do we get there? And so let's talk about that. The first step really to moving out of a transactional mindset is to shift our understanding of how major gifts works. And we set the stage by how major gifts fits into that donor pipeline, with all the other fundraising functions. As you can see here, the pipeline is designed to move donors into more strategic and transformational giving. And each part of the pipeline needs to be healthy and nurture the donor into the kind of relationship that they want with the organization. And as you move through the donor pipeline, you become more personal in your communication with the donors. A direct response is like one-to-many, major gifts is one-to-one, and this means that your communication is becoming more personal and individualized to the donor's preferences, their interests, as you move into a deeper relationship with your donor. In all of this, it's important to keep in mind that your major gift caseload has a dual purpose. You're equally focused on securing funds for program and fulfilling your donor's passions and interests. Both purposes must be held in balance in order to create a thriving major gifts program. And remember that every major donor on a caseload should be delivering net revenue. That doesn't mean you throw donors away as soon as their giving changes, but you do need to weigh your efforts and investment with the donor's capacity and inclination for your mission. You have such an important role in partnering with your donor. You serve as a bridge between the world's greatest needs and your donor's passions and interests. And when you nurture that relationship, keeping the dual purpose of major gifts in balance, incredible things can happen. When we work with an organization, either through consulting or one of our courses, we bring a data provided system and structure that will support you in creating transformational relationships with your donors. The structure isn't complex, but it does take hard work and dedication. In our strategy, we recommend a dedicated major gift officer who's working to develop meaningful relationships with a caseload of qualified donors. And we recommend that this caseload's about 150 donors, consists of 150 donors who are tiered based on inclination, capacity, and relationship. For every caseload donor, you have a personalized 12-month communication plan and a cash flow to revenue goal. Here's a key point. Not every donor giving at the major gift level belongs on your caseload. To find the ones who do, and to ensure you have donors on your caseload who truly want to engage with you and be in a deeper relationship with your organization, we follow a qualification cycle that provides the donor with multiple opportunities to engage in two-way interactions. This strategy was adapted from proven sales strategies, and at any point in this process, the donor may relationally qualify. And then you remove them from this cycle and put them into your caseload, build a plan, and work that plan. One of the most important parts of this process is prompt follow-up and staying on schedule. If you say you'll be calling in a few days, in an introduction letter, for example, you need to be sure to call in a few days. And so to stay organized, we recommend batching qualification, a couple dozen donors at a time, especially at the beginning when you might be qualifying a full caseload, to allow yourself time to be on a good pace. And as you're preparing your qualification pool of donors, you'll want to remember this 1 in 3 ratio. So in our experience, we found that roughly 1 in 3 donors who meet your major gifts criteria will qualify and want a deeper relationship with your organization. So when you're preparing your qualification pool, you want to ensure you have enough donors to fill your caseload. If you're starting from scratch, that means you have to have 450 donors in your pool, so you'll land at 150 qualified donors. It's important to keep in mind that this ratio might differ slightly for your organization. If you have a history of workplace giving, for example, membership programs, you may need more donors in your pool because these donors may be less connected as pure mission donors. And once you've connected with and qualified a donor and move them onto your caseload, now you tier them. So remember that tiers are fluid, should change. They can and should change as you learn more about your donor. And tiering helps you be efficient with your time and strategic with how you're interacting with your donors. You only have so much time and energy, and so it's critical you use that wisely. This is a graphic illustration of how we would tier a caseload. As you can see, fewest donors in tier A, but those donors have the most personalized and strategic plans. They'll also have the highest return on investment. As you move towards tier C, you're creating slightly less personalized strategies, but you're still creating individualized plans and revenue goals. So now that you have the donors tiered, your next step is to create a cash flow goal as part of your communication planning. Right? If you don't know where you're going, you can't have a plan to get you there, right? So when you look at goal setting, we create goals for each individual on the caseload. As you learn more about the donor, you get valuable information about their giving preferences. But to start, you'll take a look at what they've done in the past. What's their past giving like? When in the year do they typically make their gift? What do they usually give to? All this is important context for goal setting. The value of setting individualized goals is you can, A, you know where you're going with each donor, and B, you can clearly see which donors have given more and who's behind in their giving. And this gives you a clearer picture to share with leadership if there's revenue changes. Like you can see on this snapshot, this example, one donor's business is hurting, so their giving is down. Another donor had a special gift last year, which is then skewing the variance. We're not going to get that again this year, so we need to be able to plan for that. And we have a plan for every donor. So creating your communication plan, you use that, you've got a goal, revenue goal, you use that ask as the anchor of the plan. It's the first thing you put into your plan, then you build around it with meaningful touch points to report on impact, cultivate them towards the ask, connect with them personally. And you can see here, there's two examples, Paul and Betty, right? Their communication preferences, their interest areas are being taken into consideration throughout the plan. And this is really important because it shows the donor you've heard them and respect how they want to connect with your organization. So we recommend, a touch point once a month or so for your donors. And there's a lot of different kinds of those. So use a variety of touch points in your planning that you can connect deeply with your donor and share information that reinforces your partnership. Main types, problem or gap statement, you see on the left there, you're showing the donor the need, sharing about the problem, right? This is maybe an additional need within the community or a disaster that caused a gap in funding, or just what you're working on to solve. Sometimes organizations will go straight to the solution and how the donor can be part of the solution, but it's even more important to speak to the problem because this is what connects to the heart of your donor. And I always coach folks to put that gap statement maybe a month or two right before the ask so that it's top of mind. The ask, pretty straightforward. Clear opportunity for the donor to make an impact on a project or the program that they care about. Thanks can be very a simple moment of gratitude, a phone call. Many ways to be creative with this kind of a thank you touch point. Maybe do this multiple different ways. We've had some organizations share thanks from people that they serve, or thanks from program coordinators, the CEO or board members, and the other key partners who understand the impact of the donor's contribution. YMAD, which stands for You Made a Difference. Thanks for that timely question in the chat. There's a variety of ways of sharing impact, essentially sharing how the donors made a difference with their giving. And these are just sort of meaningful connections that deepen your partnership with the donor by continually showing how the donor is making a difference in the world or in their community and why you value them. And remember that the last type of touch that there is personal connection, right? So your donor has an entire life outside of their giving to your organization. They, as you learn more and more about them, you can be thoughtful in how you connect with them personally. And this could be just sharing an article about an area of personal interest, something that they said, a card congratulating them on their child's graduation, whatever feels like it connects to the donor as a person. In all of your conversations with donors, including intro calls, gift solicitations, we recommend using this permission-based asking model, which is an approach we developed several years ago, inspired by language from Seth Godin, related to sales conversations, designed to flow like a true conversation. We found that many asking models were linear and focused on moving the donor towards the ask, rather than seeing the donor as a partner and facilitating a conversation that honors and respects wherever the donor is in that conversation. Lots to talk about in this model, and we have some content helping unpack how to use this in different settings. I encourage you to check some of that content out. We'll put a link to a white paper about permission-based asking in the chat. Two key points on permission-based asking before we move on is you as the fundraiser have a role to be a partner and a facilitator of the conversation. So you're listening, you're asking permission, but you're also nudging forward to get through all of your goals for the conversation. And then if you look at that model, all those black arrows represent yes/no questions that empower the donor to confirm they're ready to move forward in the conversation. For example, it's very easy to begin with the meeting with connect, but to go from connect to align could look like, it's so great to see you, Jeff. Thanks for sharing about your recent trip to Italy. It sounded like it was an awesome time. But hey, look, we got a lot to get through. You're a busy guy. You ready to get started? And then Jeff says yes, he's ready to get started, and we move into a line and we move on with the conversation I've facilitated through by asking permission to move ahead. Lots more to talk about there. We'll continue to move ahead. Okay, so as you continue to move out of a transactional mindset and begin treating your donors like partners, you have a caseload full of only those donors who want a relationship with you. Now you'll want to begin to identify those transformational donors on your caseload. We've looked at a lot of donor files, and I can guarantee that you have at least one transformational donor in your organization. And if you follow the structure we've been talking about to develop a genuine partnership, then you'll lay the groundwork for this kind of a relationship. When you start thinking about planning for transformational gifts, there's a few common misunderstandings that you want to keep in mind and try to avoid. You'll see a theme here a little bit as we go through these. The first is thinking that you don't have these kinds of donors. You do. We're confident that you do. It's just a matter of connecting with them authentically and showing them the potential of what you can do together. Maybe you're not creating annual plans that get you towards that transformational ask. Maybe you're convinced that donors won't respond to this kind of an ask. And we talk a lot about the stories we make up. This is another story that gets in the way of an honest partnership with the donor. Maybe you don't have anything to present to the donor. It's a real problem if you don't have anything to present to the donor. And it's why we focus so much on creating donor offers in our trainings and as part of our structure. Or maybe you're convinced the donor will only give their annual amount. This is a $10,000 donor. I don't want to disrupt that $10,000. In a lot of organizations, especially we talk about membership or programs, it can be challenging to move a donor out of that annual giving mindset because we've trained them to be there. We've trained them to be there. And this is where donor offers can really be powerful to give the donor a greater perspective about the potential impact they can make in partnership with your organization. Now, to move into a transformational relationship with a donor, few things need to be in place. Right? We talked about all the system and structure leading up to here. You got to create a strong relationship with the donor to start with. We look at Tier A donors, identify 2 to 3 that you want to create a transformational giving plan for. Now, this kind of plan requires trust between you and the donor and the organization. That means you need to be honest and truthful and communicative with the donor and internally. You also need to work collaboratively across your organization to ensure you actually have a plan to use the gift for the intended impact. So you need to have strategic conversations with leadership, with finance, with program as you're crafting your transformational giving plan. All right, we've talked about it a couple times, but you can't create a transformational giving plan if you don't have a meaningful donor offer or offers, preferably. We have an entire process called the Donor Impact Portfolio, which helps identify program costs and develop language for how to communicate impact and create donor offers that connect to the donor's passions and interests. We've created this service because of how often we've seen organizations, even large organizations with well-respected programs, struggle to create compelling and believable offers for their donors. And this is absolutely key as you partner more deeply with your donors. So as you can see, how you plan for a transformational donor pulls from our standard system and structure, but requires a bit more planning, more strategy. In many instances, these plans go beyond a 12-month plan, usually 24, even 36 months. They can be a bit shorter or longer, depending on the donor relationship, and that's the driver. And one key thing I want to point out is that you continue to solicit for ongoing gifts throughout your plan. One of the biggest mistakes that we make, or that organizations make, is that they think they need to stop asking for gifts as they prepare to ask for a transformational gift, and this actually does more damage than anything. Keep asking while you're going through it. So here's what we saw some example plans, 12-month plans. This is a 24-month plan. You can see in here we've got it marked in red are a couple of those asks, the regular asks, as we're working towards a major transformational ask that comes in the 2nd September of this 24-month plan. So there's a bunch of strategic touches based on keeping this donor connected, invitations to events, come take a look at the various things that we've got going on, and the annual gifts are continue to be solicited. Come to the gala. Also, let's talk about legacy. Let's talk about, we're diving in and learning more and more and more about and getting permission to present a proposal discussing a major a transformational investment and a plan giving component of that in, as you can see, September of the 2nd year of this plan. Mm-hmm. And here's another one. This one actually starts with a transformational, almost starts with a transformational gift. January, in May, that first May, we've made an ask for $300,000 for a field house renovations. And the donor says yes. And then there are a bunch of touches aimed at connecting the donor with the impact of that specific gift. And we find out throughout the course of this that that the donor has a passion for Native American students. There's an ask for a scholarship related to that passion, while also keeping this donor connected to the field house and athletics and invitations to games. And you can see towards the end, there's invitations to athletic events, there's invitations to graduation. Come see the student body and the accomplishments that these that your students are having. Come see all of the impact your gifts are making possible. And no, we're not leaving these donors alone for 5 years after a $12 million gift.
Yeah, good point. Now, as you think about everything we've shared today about how you can partner with your donors more deeply, I want to empathize that it takes everyone at your organization to move from transactional mindset to a transformational relationship-focused approach. Leadership must be on board and an advocate for this kind of approach. The leader has to have a vital role in rallying support from other departments, confidently asking for what you need to accomplish this work and stay on path. And beyond leadership, you'll need to have a strong internal collaboration and partnership with finance, program, and the larger community that's working to achieve your mission, including those you serve. You must need to develop trust and educate some of your internal partners about why you need this information, the role of donors, and the role of fundraising. Remember to create open lines of communication and understanding. And don't forget to report back to your internal team on wins, that they're a part of this too. Do you have the right support systems? One thing you can do right now to start taking some action to move out of a transactional mindset is to begin asking questions about your internal support systems. Here are just a few we recommend that can help you. And your team can uncover opportunities to treat your donors as partners instead of those ATMs. So, before we get to our time for questions, let me ask, if we had a way to teach you how to stop treating your donors like ATMs and move into a transformational giving mindset, would you be interested in that? Raise your hand. All right, I see a bunch of you. Well, our next offering of the certification course for major gift fundraisers and fundraising leaders starts on June 9th. These courses really have it all and will provide a comprehensive training on the system and structure you can implement to create meaningful relationships with your donors in any fundraising landscape. And our course for fundraising leaders gives you all the tools and resources you need to successfully manage your major gift program and support the fundraisers on your team. These courses are designed to run in tandem along with our certification course in mid-level fundraising, so that your entire team can participate and gain a consistent approach and common language in how they fundraise. Now, here's a note from a Veritas Group Academy alumna about the value of this information and how it helped her raise more money for her organization. I mean, essentially what Suzanne is saying is that VGA gave her the skills necessary to prioritize her donors and help her stay on track while keeping the mission of the organization front and center so that she could inspire her donors to make a difference. Now, if you're looking to grow your major gift program or take your work with donors to another level, then you're in luck, because for a limited time, you can get our $200 off of our upcoming course, which starts again on June 9th. So just use this coupon code 515special when you sign up for either the certification course for major gift fundraisers or for fundraising managers and executives. So Karen, now is a great time to start taking questions.
Thank you, Jeff and Matt. Great questions coming in the Q&A box. A couple of you popped your questions in the chat box. I know that's common. I've tried to capture them, but just in case, pop them in the Q&A box. It's also at the bottom of your screen, so I don't miss you when I ask all your great questions. All right, let's jump in. This is from Jada. My organization and I are trying to better segment out appeals to encourage our donors and patrons. With that, we're starting to include more stats in our appeal letter. Do you have any tips and advice on how to motivate donors while not being too number heavy in appeals? What is a good way to include stats while speaking to the donors? Why in philanthropy and giving is a call to action? So, Matt, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you know about your donor and how they connect to the mission in many ways. It sounds like this question is around more of a marketing direct mail, like how do we build content? And I would certainly encourage you to leverage some of the best practices there. I think as you take that content and bring it towards your mid-level, your major donors, those folks you have a personal relationship with, take good content and tailor that in a way that is going to resonate with the donors as you know them. Jeff, I know you're kind of more plugged into the best practices for direct.
So stats are great, but stats don't necessarily inspire so much. Use stats to highlight the need, obviously. But where you're really going to move the donor is through emotion and through storytelling. So use good storytelling, use emotion, and use stats to beef up the problem that you're trying to address. That's how you can be effective with your donors in a more direct response situation.
All right. Let's give this one to you, Jeff. It's anonymous. What do you do with the 12-month plan for mid-level? You talked about the 12-month plan per donor for major gifts. So talk about that.
So as Matt pointed out, when he was showing that 12-month plan, it was by individual in major gifts. In mid-level, you would do something similar, but you're doing it by tier. So in mid-level, you'll have A, B, and C tier, and you'll create plans by tier rather than by individuals. And that plan is what you would overlay on top of your current donor communication plan for all your donors. So it doesn't replace what you're doing for most of your direct response donors. It overlays on top of that plan.
Okay, sorry for the typing. I'm trying to answer questions at the same time.
Multitasking, all right.
I know, I'm a juggle too at the same time. Let's see here. This is a good one for you, Matt, from Beth. How many attempts or time period do you recommend before removing a non-responsive donor from your portfolio? Great question.
It's a great question, right? And I think a lot of times, back to the stories we tell ourselves, a lot of times we really want that response. And we see that donor's last name, or we say, this donor's been with us for so long. Why would they not want to have a relationship with us? So if you remember the qualification series, the qualification cycle slide that we talked about a little bit earlier, there was really 7 steps, and several of those steps had multiple kind of attempts. So there was like an intro letter and then multiple follow-up attempts for step 2. Step 3 would be a YMAD, sharing impact touch point. Step 4, a donor survey, and then multiple follow-up attempts with step 5, and then another YMAD touch point. And then there's a 7th step of kind of a handwritten card. It's been great. You're making such an impact, and it's almost a blessing release. I'm here for any questions that come up. But that's about that 3, 4, 5 month period of time with a donor, 7 different steps, all those multiple attempts to get a hold of them. At that point, you can reasonably say you've done about everything possible to get a hold of that donor, and that by not responding, that donor has indicated that they're not likely to want a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. And if the donor's already on your portfolio and they are qualified, and after that process, you're not hearing from them, it depends on what tier you have them in, what kind of giving history they have, how much they're giving, because you may, twice a year, you want to refresh your caseload, and you'll look at some of those donors that are not connecting with you. And depending on some of that criteria, you may take them off a portfolio. And if they're a tier A that's been with you a long time, you might wait a couple of years, seriously, because there's could be all kinds of different reasons they're not communicating with you. But, a majority of them, if they haven't given or talked to you after a year, might they might be telling you that they don't want that relationship any longer.
It reminds me of we worked with a lot of fundraisers at St. Jude Alsac, and one of the guys who's hilarious was like he was so unhappy about our request to remove some people from his portfolio. And he tells such a great story because he's like, man, I was resistant. I was difficult. I was not going to do it. And when I finally understood what I was doing, now I'm seeing how I have so much more time and space for donors who do want to be in relationships. So
Exactly.
you're not throwing them off a cliff. They're still in direct marketing. They can still come
Yeah.
back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was hilarious talking about it. Just along the line of touch points, I want to ask you really quick, Matt, and then Jeff, I want to come back. I want to come to you about this emergency question. So,
Hmm.
Matt, a couple questions about one is from Danielle. Does a general newsletter count, like a whole mailing out to donors? And I had another person ask about visiting projects, like how do we use those in that whole process of either qualifying or just managing donors as individuals?
Yeah, so the newsletter piece is an interesting one. I think for it to quote count as one of your plan touches is you would want to figure out how you're going to personalize that newsletter for the donors that you know. So the newsletter is created. It's a piece of content that's fantastic, and it showcases a lot of great stories, a lot of great impact, and and maybe comes out from marketing, it comes out from the direct mail. It's an email blast, and then you come along and follow up and say, hey, a week later or 3 days later, hey, Jeff and Karen, I want to make sure this got stopped in your bed. I want to make sure you saw the story on page 4 because that really speaks to that thing we talked about a couple months ago that you're really interested in. So it's the personalization of the touch that you're planning for.
Yep.
And it's very handy to know when those newsletters are coming out as you're building your plan so that you can be thoughtful about how you personalize those.
Mhm.
All right, we got a lot of questions coming here. Y'all ready? Let's get going.
Yeah.
Okay, anonymous to you,
Yeah.
Jeff. What are your thoughts on the emergency urgency appeals that have become very popular? Is there space for those in a donor relationship like this? You mentioned still soliciting which makes sense, but would something like this pull too much focus?
Well, if you're talking in a mass level, yes, they work very well, as long as they're authentic and they're really an emergency. With your major donors, I think you really need to know which donors in your portfolio are open to those emergency type requests and be able to contact them because they have already told you that that's something that they're interested in. So if you ever have an emergency, those are the donors you go to. And then there's some donors on your portfolio that don't want to hear that. So that's why it's so important on the major gift side to really know your donors because you'll know if you have an offer around an emergency, which of those donors really want to respond, whether they're, you know, giving an annual gift or they're part of a campaign or whatever. This is something additional that they would love to do. And so I think a lot of times, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the fundraisers hold back on times not showing donors an offer like that because they think, well, they really love this and they might not care about this and so they don't send those things out. I would say let's find out from the donor first. Don't create a story in your head that the donor isn't going to give. That might be something they really want to be a part of. And why deny them the opportunity? They can say no.
I'd add on to that, Jeff, that, one way to be relational about that is the appeal, the special appeal, the emergency appeal goes out and you can follow up with the donors later, shortly after that and say, hey, I mean, we got some real world stuff going on. I'm sure you've seen some of the materials we've put out. Would love to ask a few questions about that and how that's landing and what your awareness is of it. And, is this kind of on the center of mass for your interest area?
Yeah.
I can make sure you're updated, or I can kind of focus my attention on other things with you.
Yeah, so one of the ways you saw in the presentation to help you get your arms around all of this great planning is to use our donor engagement plan. So Tara, you asked about that, and I popped the link to access that for free on our website in the chat box, so you all can look for that there. It's quite an amazing resource. All right, we'll come back to you, Jeff, from
Okay.
Cheryl. Who asked for the transformational gift? The MGO who holds the relationship or the CEO who may or may not?
I think it really depends on the donor and what you know about the donor. So uh, it definitely could be the major gift officer. They've been walking with that donor, but there are some donors. I mean, if it's a transformational gift, they want to be asked by the CEO or the head of the organization because that makes it really important, and it's important for the donor. It's really, and that's where the MGO who really knows their donor will know who's the right person to make the ask. It could even be the head program person who's receiving the gift that makes the program go. It really does depend on what you know about the donor and how do you think the donor is going to respond. So it's not like, yep, only the MGO makes the ask or only the CEO makes. Don't make those assumptions. It's really about what the donor is going to resonate with.
Great. I'm a new fundraiser for my university. When engaging donor alumni, how do I plan ahead to include philanthropy talks into conversation with them? Matt.
Yeah, I think making it clear what your role is, and then using that permission-based asking structure to think through your conversation and all the goals that you have in your conversation with the donor. You're not your first meeting with them. You're probably not asking for money. Maybe you are because it's time for them to give, but you want to introduce yourself and who you are and what your role is. If you're alumni relations, and that includes a fundraising component, mention. I'm excited to share with you the impact of your philanthropy, and I'd love to talk about your philanthropic goals here at the university, and like kind of make it very clear that philanthropy, giving, the gift is going to be a part of the conversation. And then you can play a role in that, a very meaningful role to the donor in your conversations with them by not making it awkward when you're talking about money and just saying, hey, I have a couple questions about you, your giving, when you like to give, just some ways I can make sure I'm serving you and your intent the best. Is now a great time to talk about that? and then get into it. And that's it kind of puts the donor at ease. They know that they give, and they know that you're a fundraiser. And so, be bold and be confident that that they're having that conversation with you because they know.
Mhm.
So, Jeff, this is anonymous. What strategic actions can we, as major gift officers, take to balance our current workload while placing greater emphasis on donor relations and stewardship? With only one dedicated donor stewardship colleague serving the entire university, and with clear data showing that donors seek more meaningful connections before they make a gift, how can we, as MGOs, fill the gaps in ways that are both impactful and efficient?
I think it all starts with having a plan. So if you have you have your portfolio and you have a goal and a donor, and all your donors have a plan for how you're going to achieve those goals. In that plan will be a number of stewardship touch points throughout that year. That is the way that you are going to remain consistent in stewarding those donors, along with eventually soliciting and reporting back on impact. So that really is the key if you want to stay consistent across the board with your donors on stewardship and making sure that they are being stewarded well, because your plan will have that already incorporated for them throughout the course of the year.
So, Matt, as you're working in this planning, Jackie's asking, will this strategy work for all groups, boomers, Gen X, millennium, ethnic groups, etc.?
Absolutely. Because, one of the first things that you want to do when you're making your plan is, what does my donor care about? How do they want to be communicated with? Where do I want their relationship with the organization to go? That may look different. It will look different for every individual. And, you can potentially draw some conclusions about your donors from what cohort of generation or group that they're a part of, and you're going to know them as individual human beings, and you're going to learn an awful lot more about them than sort of the conclusions and stories you could tell about them from their cohort, right? So yes, you're going to find out a lot about their passions, interests, communication preferences, how they want to relate, and then build the plan accordingly. So yes, this should work with any group, any cohort, any humans.
Humans so far.
Humans, yeah.
So Tara's and I'll just answer this one really quickly. Can you speak? Tara's asking, speaking to the certification course, is there one that is tailored more to starting out, and are they live or self-guided? So all our certification courses, whether you're starting out or whether you're sophisticated, can be very beneficial, because they are everything we do in our consulting put into training, and you do it on your own pace. Online, and then we have live sessions for discussion, and then there's a whole over a couple thousand people or more than that now in a wonderful community group that you can get in all kinds of stations and connections and conversations. So, and we also have on-demand shorter courses, like beginning courses, available on the website, so I'll put that link in for you. All right, another question here. Matt, talk about strategy for donor offers that can go towards unrestricted funding while still honoring their interests.
One of the big takeaways from our donor impact portfolio process is we come up with a lot of different ways of saying your gift of $10,000 is the equivalent of a warm meal for 350 kids, a day or whatever. Whatever it is your organization is doing, your gift of $1,000 is the equivalent of one student getting all the books paid for an entire year. And that's articulating the impact in a very specific way, but that is not is not telling them that their $1,000 bought books for this student, if that makes sense. And so it's saying, it's the equivalent of, if you can showcase some very specific things that you do as an example of the general operating, like every day we do these things and it costs us this much money. Your gift is the equivalent of doing this part of that. that can be a really powerful way of sharing impact. It can be a really powerful way of asking for increased gifts. It can be really, really powerful, and it does not require restricted giving.
These are great questions, you all. Jeff, what advice would you give on transitioning a donor from mid to major level donor and vice versa? Should you still keep in touch after the transition? How many touch points in a year? How do we transfer folks over when you are in relationship?
Yeah. So the reason we do this is because mid-level is a one to some kind of situation where major gifts is one to one. And if a donor starts, their engagement level goes higher and higher, and they become more interested in what you're doing and giving at higher levels, and it's now time to pass them off. The best way to do that is to have the mid-level officer get on a call with the major or with the donor and the major gift officer and talk about that transition, that you're doing this because you want greater attention put on them, that they will be able to come see you, that they know much more about the programs intimately, and they want to be able to bring you into those. And that's how we kind of do that transition from mid to major. And, sometimes we've done it through letters and other things if it can't be the person to person kind of handoff. But I would say almost 99.9% of the time, the donor understands and loves that. There might be situations where you might keep a major donor on a mid-level caseload with a mid-level rep. Perhaps you're a local organization and you've made this connection, and there's a possibility of still having that connection with that major gift officer or mid-level officer. Or you don't have any room, like the major gift officer doesn't have any room for more donors in their portfolio, so you might keep them on your mid-level portfolio for a time until you can move them, because ultimately you want to give that donor more time with someone, and that will increase their giving. It will. We see it over and over again. And so if it's done well, it can actually be a really amazing process for the donor and for the mid and major gift officer.
So Matt, if you can see the Q&A box, check out the next two questions that are about communication plans, and I'm going to ask Jeff one while you prepare for those. Those are great questions. So Jeff, how do you apply all we're talking about to a smaller organization or staffed organization?
Yeah. Yeah, we often, first of all, it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. You can have a mid and you can have a major gift program. Let's say you're a one-person shop. You're doing all of it. And I get it. I had that job when I first started out in fundraising, so I know exactly what that feels like. The way you can have a major gift program and still do all the other stuff is to figure out how much time can you devote to major gifts. Of all the other things, how much time of your overall time can you devote? So let's just say you can commit 10% of your time to major gifts. Okay, so if you can devote 10% of your time, we know that a full-time major gift officer can handle no more than 150 donors and do a good job with it. So if you have 10% of your time, that means you can handle 15 donors. 15 donors should be on your portfolio if you can only give 10% of your time to major gifts. That will give you enough time to spend quality time with those donors over the course of the week and the month and the year. And so the key, however, is to make sure you really have a plan, that you really are set for, you know exactly what you're going to do with all of those donors, and that you're really strict about keeping track of staying at that 10%. And that's the key, because there will be so many other things competing for your time that you have to commit to that 10%. And if you do, you can have a major gift program. It's with 15 donors, but that's okay. You can start anywhere.
So Matt, did you see the two questions on there?
I can, yeah. So, one of the questions, can you give an example of how personalized each touch point should be throughout the year? How can you build out a 12 to 24 month strategy with only one or two meetings with a major donor? Um, I think keeping in mind all the different kinds of touch points, all the different things that you have to do with your donor and where you're trying to go with your donor is gonna inform your touch point plan. And so, you've got to share impact. You've got to articulate needs so that you can cultivate the next gift. You have to ask, you have to say thank you, you have to connect on a personal level. And you can accomplish some of those things in face-to-face visits. Some donors want to meet face-to-face all the time and have plenty of time. Some donors do not want to meet face-to-face, don't need to, don't have any time. Um, and and so we see a lot of programs that have a minimum number of face-to-face visits. I think it's more important for us to have a good plan that's based on what the donor actually needs in their relationship with the organization, and then execute that plan, follow that plan, so that you achieve the goal. So there could be a hyper personalized, very intensely, labor intensive impact reports that you're building for a donor. You may have a donor that you meet with all the time. You see them after every board meeting. You connect with them all the time, but by and large, you want to plan to make sure you're hitting all of the key things that they need, which I just mentioned, and you tier your donors, so your A tier donors get more personalization and strategy and thought and cross organizational input than your B and then your C donors. And so communication plan. Second question here is about communication plans. Does the communication plan happen after someone is qualified? Thinking about, a mid-level point of view, someone going through the introduction series. And so I would say, yes, you begin to work your 12-month plan after you have gone through the qualification or introduction series with your donor. And with major gifts, as soon as you've had good two-way communication, you've established, yes, this person belongs on my caseload. You take them, you put them on the caseload, you build that plan, and you begin to do it. On mid-level, you go all the way through the communication plan that we would recommend, and then you carry that on into your 12-month communication plan after that.
Thank you. So, Jeff, quick question. What dollar range do you define mid or major gifts? How can this, I know it varies per organization, but how do you define it?
So the way you'll do that is really to look at your data. And every organization is different of what they say is a mid or a major gift. In general, overall, mid-level tends to be the 1,000 to 9,999, and major gifts 10,000 and above. But we also have other organizations who are smaller that 1,000 plus cum and above is a major, and 500 to 999 is mid-level. It is different for all different organizations. The way you do that is really look at a pipeline chart in your database, looking at cum amounts and looking at how many donors you have at different cum levels, so that you can see where that mid and major part is. And you'll be able to see it if you do that pipeline analysis of your own file.
All righty. And how many people on a caseload for mid and major gifts, Matt?
If you have a full-time major gift officer, 150. Full-time mid-level officer, anywhere from 5 to 700. We usually start folks off right at 600.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Any closing words, Jeff? And then I'll close this out. This has been a great session.
Yeah. So yesterday I was at a fundraising symposium in Philadelphia, breakfast kind of thing. And I am up on this panel and we're all done. And I'm finally coming down off of the thing. And this woman named Lynn comes rushing over to me. And she said, Jeff, I can't believe you're here. I didn't know you were going to be here, but I just finished the certification course for major gifts from the fall. And she said, I just wanted to say that this was the best thing I ever did. I've been a fundraiser for 10 years and I took this course. I thought I knew a lot, but this opened my eyes to so many new things. And she was like, I just want to thank you so much for providing this course. It has changed how I think about major gifts. And this was just yesterday. I'm sitting there. So I knew we were doing this today. I said, I got to relay this story because it's so powerful. And she's not the first one. We've had scores of people. When I go to a conference, people say the same thing. These courses are incredible and they have changed people's lives. And if you're looking to up your game in major gifts, this is it. So I hope you sign up. I want to see you next month, and it'll be an incredible experience for you, and you'll learn a ton.
That's cool. That's a really cool story, Jeff. Okay, thank you for being with us today and for sharing your great questions. As a reminder, you'll receive a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck later this week. To register for our upcoming session of the certification course for major gift fundraisers and fundraising leaders, visit us at www.veritasgroup.com/courses. And our code is 515 special at checkout for that $200 off. But you have to do that by next Friday to get that discount. And as always, we're able to assist you with any questions by emailing academy@veritasgroup.com. We hope to see you in upcoming courses and webinars. Great to have you and see you with us today. Thank you so much, Jeff and Matt. Everyone have a great week.
Thank you.